All right, so we are going to enhance some QA/QC workflows. Now, the word enhance would be to improve or make better, um, but if you don't have one at all yet, this is also a nice way to kind of start up that whole process. So before we get into that, just a little bit of information about Ideate. They've been a software developer since 1985, and several languages are supported, so on. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but the main thing is if you have Ideate software already and you have some questions or need some support, there is an email address, support@ideatesoftware.com. They are very responsive. And if you don't have any of this Ideate software yet and would like to look further into it, there's www.ideatesoftware.com. And there are a host of getting started guides and so on. So, and some ROI calculators for some of the apps and other software. So let's kind of move over into our topic today. So we're going to look at six different things. I say five at first because, the bold list is five, and then we've got 2 bullet points there. Well, Ideate Apps is a collection of several tools that are a little more targeted, but I'll explain that a little bit more as we go along. But we're going to be looking at several things, and we will go through these one at a time. Each of these can be both useful in QA and QC. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's look at what is QA and QC. So quality assurance is what we're going to do to set up our standards, put things in place to give us our best chance of success and having things nice and consistent and standard. So that's the setup process, whereas QC is basically going on in the back end and making sure that we actually follow those standards. And so that's what we're going to be taking a look at. And I'm not going to tease these things apart for each tool, but you'll notice that some of these kind of lend themselves to setting up standards, but also many of them serve double duty and help us check on those standards later on as well. Okay, so first up is Ideate Explorer. Ideate Explorer gives us a much more comprehensive way to look through a project and the what all goes into the model and the families involved and so forth. There's a whole lot of information there. Project Browser is more about views and sheets. Yes, there's a list of families down at the bottom, but it's just a list. It's nothing in context. Ideate Explorer gives us a good bit more information, allows us to move around the model and take a look at things really well. And one of the big things is warnings review. That's kind of clunky the way Revit does it, and Explorer makes that much better. We'll take a quick look at that too. All right, so here in Revit, we'll go ahead and launch Explorer. And, we can look at various parts or the entire project. And we have some ways to sort the information. We also have some filters, but we'll come back to that. So if we go down here to doors and just check the box, there's 141 doors there. And we isolate those doors, and there are all the doors in our project. Now, I don't know if that view is particularly helpful, but it's nice to know that you can do that, and I'll be using that isolate as we go forward to make it a little easier to see what we're working on, which is useful as a spectator, but also very helpful when you're working in the project yourself. All right, so here's some of the filters. If we take a look at fire rating, for instance, we can see that we've got some doors that do not have a fire rating assigned. And So there's a quick selection box or section box. We're looking at just these single flush doors. And the rule for that, the filter rule, is basically finding doors that don't have a fire rating defined in their type properties. And if we go to this door, sure enough, fire rating is blank. Now I could populate that, but I'm not going to bother with that. We're just kind of moving around, exploring, since we're using Explorer, I suppose, pardon the pun. All right. Again, just taking a look at a couple of other doors that we have to see that they fit that filter is giving us the information we're looking for. All right. Now this, we're looking at what kind of objects do we have in this model that are in-place families. In-place families are useful, but also have some possible drawbacks in some ways. So we might want to take a look at what we have in the model to make sure that the in-place families we have are appropriate. So we'll go back to the full model. By the way, that MC is model check, an abbreviation, so it's part of the model checking tool as well. We'll get into that a little later as well. So now we're looking for views that do not have a view template assigned. And again, we'll just kind of browse through this so you can see how the information is presented. Sure enough, no view template. And there's the rule for that filter that's finding the information we need. By the way, these rules, many of these just are there first time you launch the software, but it is possible, of course, to create or modify rules to suit the criteria you need. And there's a list of the rules that come with the software. And there are actually, those are the basic rules. There are more rules that you can go find, these bonus rules. And for searching up other things as well. You know, trying to keep the list a little shorter and not throw everything in there, but it's still available. And like I said, those can also be modified or created on your own if you want to go that route. Okay. So now we're going to use an integration with Ideate Query. Even though we were in Ideate Explorer, we're using one of the apps in conjunction with it to narrow down what information we want to find. I'm not interested in all of the columns. I just want to look for certain ones. Okay, so Query allows me to kind of drill down to a specific set of columns. And we isolate those, and you can see that those are kind of custom columns. We'll go back to the full model here. There we go. If I actually uncheck the box. And here we have some ceilings selected, but again, we're going to run the query so we can, instead of looking at all 68 ceilings, let's find particular ones. We have 3 that are 16 square feet only. So why so small? Where are those? And there they are. Okay. So above some of our entrances. Okay. We'll go back and browse some other information. Again, Ideate Query will allow us to drill down to certain things. Now, in this case, we're not necessarily pulling up the subset. We're just adding a little bit of information so we can see, oh, okay, we just want those 4 plans. And then we can drill down once we've found the walls base constraint information. And there they are. Okay, so much simpler to drill down to the information you want and need and find it and work with it rather than trying to go through Project Browser. Explorer is very good with that. Okay. Now, in the context of QA/QC, we're also looking for those things that might be problematic or are kind of a big deal in this project, and we want to make sure that they're all there and represented. Now we're looking at some warnings in the project. Warnings in Revit out of the box are a little tough to work with. They just give you an element ID, and then you have to go hunt for that and work on these things one at a time, and that dialog box disappears when you try to work on it. In this case, I'm editing a floor to line it up so that we're not overlapping those two floors anymore. And as soon as we do that, it automatically updates and that warning disappears. Now, we also have some RPC content here that looks like it's doubled up. We have things on top of each other. And there's no real need for that. So at least we found it. And we'll just retain the originals and get rid of the others, and that warning disappears. Okay, now these warnings, another thing you can do with Ideate Explorer that's really handy is you can set up which warning categories you want to be flagged as most important, medium importance, and lower importance. Now, of course, that list that you're looking at there comes with the software out of the box. Some educated guesses have been made already, so you can work with that to begin with. But if you decide you would like to sort them differently, you can modify that list. And it can be exported and imported into other projects as well. Okay? All right. So now, lastly here, again, we can look at the entire project or a single view if we want. Here's one I particularly like. Sometimes it is really difficult to find a CAD import. You've got one floating around there. It tells you on the links, manage links. It tells you got one in there. Can't find it anywhere. Well, all I had to do here was just double click on it, and it takes me to the view, highlights it. It's already selected, makes it super easy to find. Here we go. I'll double click this one, takes me to this other view, and I can see those CAD imports. There's only a couple of them. I'm going to go ahead and use Ideate Delete to remove those. And there we go. Solve that problem. Those CAD imports are now gone. I don't have to wonder where they are or what they're messing up. All right, so that was just a little quick run through on Explorer for kind of looking over the project in general. Now let's look at a little bit. This is more on the QA side, but we can also use it to check up on things after the fact. But Style Manager allows us to get a look into the style content. It's not families, it's not settings really, but all those line styles and fill patterns and all those kinds of things. We have lists and we have management tools in Revit to do that, but it's not always really simple to work with those. And even if it is simple, it's kind of one by one, kind of laborious. So let's take a look at that. All right. So project, you've probably seen things like this where you have, especially with import dash in front of it, right? The dreaded, okay, somebody brought in a CAD import and exploded it. So now we have a gazillion line types that we don't even know what they are. So we can clean those things up a little bit more easily. Same thing with materials. So let's jump into Revit and take a look at this. Okay, so we pull up Style Manager, and right now we're looking at line styles. You'll notice the color there. Those colors mean that there are duplicate line styles. They're exactly the same except for their names. Now, I also unchecked built-in, so we're only seeing those that were user created. And you can see that, these two things are essentially the same, but they're being used in different ways. The names are different. We're going to stick with bold green, and we've merged green into that. And we're going to do roughly the same thing here with the fire rated. Notice you click the Analyze button, and it goes out and finds how many objects are using this particular line style, and we'll merge fire rated 2 into fire rating. Just makes sense. We don't need the 2. Same thing here. Now we have a lot of guidelines medium, and we only have one guide, so let's just merge guide into guideline medium. Okay. Now if we close Style Manager and go look at the Revit default list, you'll see that now bold green is there, green is not, fire rated is there, and the others, along with guidelines, those are now gone from our model. And they've been pushed over to the other line styles, so we haven't lost their line pattern or anything like that. We just cleaned it up a good bit. All right. So here we are back in Style Manager. This time we're looking at parameters, and we have a couple of duplicate parameters as well. Notice this one is an instance project parameter, and this one is a shared parameter. There are question marks there, and we can drill into a little bit more information there with the Analyze button, but we'll skip over that for now. Mostly, this is a way for us to go through and make sure that the information is in the right parameter. Okay. Of course, we have schedules and so forth that depend on a particular parameter to populate the schedule. So we want to make sure that we eliminate any distracting parameters that may seem to look for that same information. So we can remove those, make sure the information is in the right place. Okay. Oh, let's just launch that again. Okay. Thanks for a minute reanalyzing. It does a two-step analysis. So originally when you open it, it goes and looks up all the particular ones. Those question marks remain because we haven't done the more fine-grained analyze. Okay. All right. Let's move on and take a look at Ideate BIM-Link. Okay. Now BIM-Link, Explorer lets us see all the pieces and parts of our model, whereas BIM-Link is really more focused on the data inside those model elements. So parameter information. Anyway, you can read the various things there, but this is the way we're going to use BIM-Link to not only find possible problems where information hasn't been entered or entered correctly, but also allows us to modify things in a much quicker way using Excel primarily. So let's take a look at that. All right, so we'll launch BIM-Link. And again, there are some links there for quality control. And of course, that MC also means model check, so it can kind of do double duty there. Various kinds of things. There's the in-place families again, and the view templates that we looked at before. So these things, we can push this information out, which we will do here in a minute. So let's start with type naming here, or family naming rather, and we'll just export. And we've already got a copy of that, so we'll just overwrite it. Let's open that in Excel. Okay, so there's the information. There are those families. Now, those families are all families that we've created or we want to put the firm name in front of those to denote that they're not out of the box Revit catalog. They are actually, in this case, we'll just put Ideate in front of it for the firm name, basically, and it helps if we pick B instead of A. There we go. And now that we've got that formula put together to give us the new string, we just copy that all down and then copy it to the other column. We'll save that spreadsheet, and then we just basically import that spreadsheet back in. Oh, yeah, let's do that first. Okay, and there's the report we just created. And once it reads all that information, it has already made the change. These yellow ones are telling us that, okay, we're confirming that we've made that change. So now all of those families, if we scroll down here and take a look, under specialty equipment, that was the category we were working with. All of those now say Ideate as a prefix. Much quicker and easier than trying to go through and do that one at a time. We can, if we find some things in the model that maybe we are questioning, why was it done this way, or how did this get there, so on and so forth, we can go in and take a look. Now, this is rather lengthy, of course, because this is just the full report. But here we've pushed out to Excel the information about who created each of these things. So we could drill down a little bit and find those questionable elements and get a little more information from the person who created them. All right. So in this case, we're just this is some more information that has been pulled. I'm not really going to modify any of this. Just phase filter information to make sure that views have the correct phase filters assigned. It's nice to have that in a spreadsheet format. Same thing here. Views. Comparing the titles on the sheet. And that is what we would use BIMlink for. Okay. All right, now let's move on to Ideate Apps. Now there are a couple of these that we're going to take a look at. We're going to look at spell check and annotate, but we've actually already seen a couple of the others. For instance, query, which I'm not even seeing in that list. That's interesting. Okay, but we've used Ideate Query to get drilled down to some specific information using parameter information and that sort of thing. And we've also been using the Smart Delete. Smart Delete basically just gives us a little heads up as to what the downstream effects are going to be if we delete these objects. All right, so let's, like I say, the two things we're going to look at is spell check and annotate review. So let's take a look at those things. Now we're in a different project here, and some things have been intentionally misspelled. I hope intentionally misspelled, just for us to take a look at this. And so we're going to, there are various ways we can go about this. We can check schedules only or sheets and views, that sort of thing. But this is a more, rather than having to check view by view, we can spell check across the entire project. Now, this particular project is metric and is intended for the United Kingdom, so we're going to stick with that language for our spell check. And sure enough, there's some outdoor, however you pronounce that, and strangely enough, it's not giving us any useful suggestions, so we just edit that and then change it, so now it reads correctly. This one, however, the change is kind of obvious. The suggestions are working out really well for both of those. So we just click change, and then we get a little report saying that those things were modified by the spell checker. So we get a little bit of feedback at the end as to what we changed. All right, we're going to check schedules. All right, and again, so here, color, Without the U, well, all right, we're in the US, that's the way we spell it. But in the UK, where this project is destined to go, they spell it with a U. So let's go ahead and change that so that it makes sense to those across the pond. All right, and topo surface here, it's flagging that one because it doesn't really recognize it from the English dictionary. It's kind of a Revit specific term. That's fine. We can just click ignore and not worry about that one. And then it looks like we forgot an extra E in freestanding there, so we'll make that change. It's there in our schedule. Yeah, and we can look at the context up there at the top, so we don't have to search for it in the schedule. All right, line weights, again, that's kind of a CAD specific thing, it being one word rather than two, so we'll just ignore that and continue as it was. This one, there's just somebody, fat fingered that one or something like that, and so we've got to edit that. All right, so detail lines instead of detail lines, change that real quick. And again, we get a report to let us know what was fixed. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at Annotate Review, which rather than spell checking, that sort of thing, is going to let us know if we have annotation that's difficult to read, clashing with itself, or contains questionable values like this one. We can see the faucet there is clearly somewhere else. So that sink's been moved over, aligned with that wall. But that means we don't need that dimension anymore, so that can go away. Also, some clashes. We've got a wall tag that's sitting on top of a dimension string. We have a leader on top of another leader. Same song, second verse. And then we have another leader on top of a tag. So let's handle these one at a time. We'll grab this tag here and we'll move that over. No need for the leader to be that long. And got this one up here. Arrange that one nicely. Move this one over. Oop. Let's move the bottom one. Yep. A little further. Okay. And the tag, again, does not need a leader quite so long, so we can move that off of our text. All right. Now that we've kind of solved all those issues, let's click refresh. And look at that. We even get a little pat on the back. Good job. No more issues. Okay. Last but definitely not least is Ideate Automation. Now, Ideate Automation, unlike the rest of these tools, is not something that you run from inside Revit. It is not a plug-in type tool. This is an external standalone application. It is for doing a lot of those repetitive file-based tasks. But you can also run several of the other Ideate tools, apps and programs using automation to pull reports, get information from your project, maybe even just do some regular maintenance on your project. Very, very useful tool. Lets you do some of those more time-consuming, tedious tasks on your off time. In fact, let the computer do it. No need for you to get involved. So let's take a look at how some of this is put together. So here's what Ideate Automation looks like. And we have several scripts that are already predefined that come with it out of the box. So there is a health check that is just going to give us an Excel spreadsheet formatted. The other was for Power BI. We'll come back to that in a minute. So we go find a model that is on a particular ACC hub. We pick which script we want. Let's do a health check and pick a folder to export to, a file name, so on. And we'll just click next, review that, and then we'll click run to let it go. Now, that is going to automatically launch Revit, pull up the appropriate model, and begin the model health check. Now, with the magic of, there's the model there, has now been loaded, but there we go, our little transition, the magic of TV time. We don't have to wait for all of that to happen. And now that task is completed. It just showed completed there at the top of the list. So let's take a look at what that provided for us. We did a health check, and there's the date for the one we just ran. And there we are. There's the information. Notice we only pass on one of those. The rest were all red. But fortunately, we have all of these tabs in the spreadsheet to give us very detailed information about why those numbers were what they were and where those values are coming from. Okay? So, as well as warnings and so forth, let's make our way back over to the summary. There we go. And you can see CAD imports, there were only 2, and we told the script to allow 10. So we're good there. Okay. The rest we need to look into. Okay. So again, those numbers we can set up for ourselves and set those thresholds for whatever is appropriate for our particular projects. Okay. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you can also get a Power BI template and data set. You can request that. It is not provided out of the box, but a simple request will get that for you. If you would prefer to use Power BI, gives you a little bit better, prettier pictures, analyzes the data graphically somewhat better than Excel might, and allows us to also aggregate data across various spreadsheets. So that is, again, a template you can request. Here's another view of part of the Power BI information. This is kind of analogous to that information on the various tabs of the spreadsheet we saw earlier. Here's the CAD imports and the in-place families list in Power BI. Same thing with warnings. Gives us information on each of these, how many there are, and what kind of warning it is. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to share with you today. There are the 4 main things and just kind of some bullets as to what we did with them. I certainly also would like to express my thanks for attending. I do have one last little slide here just to remind you of the website in case you would like some more information. That's it.